Last week, the fine people at the Daily Wire released the movie Lady Ballers. And unbeknownst to Jeremy Boring and company, that movie has opened up an opportunity to have a broader discussion on politics in comedy, how to do it and how not to do it. Part of what opens up this opportunity has to do with the timing of when the movie was released, when the movie was first announced, and the things that had been happening for me just leading up to its first announcement. Not long before I first heard about this movie, I had seen a tweet that has since been deleted by the account Clown World, which is why all I have is this screenshot here. Now, the tweet in question was a clip from some TED Talk, which I watched in its entirety. It's not worth your time, but I'll link to it below anyway, about, how to put your politics in your comedy. And the tweet reads, "Woke comedy sucks." And as true as it is, I felt the need to add this nuance. I've spent almost a decade surrounded by progressive comedians, and I can assure you it's quite possible to be woke and funny. You just need the patience to not be preachy and a little cleverness. The patience is the hard part. I've seen my fair share of thinly veiled preaching. Now, all of this was fresh in my mind when I first heard of Lady Ballers. And while I was thinking about Lady Ballers with that tweet fresh in my mind, I realized that that movie was going to make the same point that Clown World thought they were making, but from the opposite perspective. So I was really eager to watch it. But before we go into that, I think it's important to give you a bit more about my background, because I'm going to use myself as an example a lot, and I think it's important that you have enough context to follow along. And I'm going to give you the strict minimum because I never see anyone who's actually funny go into their comedic background in detail. I think it's so cringe to do that. So in my original tweet, I'd like to unpack a bit the part where I say I've spent almost a decade surrounded by progressive comedians. Here's what I mean. In the domain of live comedy, the art of taking people who have gathered together in a room and bought tickets to be in that room in order to hopefully laugh and try to get good at making those people laugh on a somewhat consistent basis. There are three main approaches to go about it. There's stand-up, which I put at the top because of course, there's sketch comedy down here, and there's improv comedy. My thing was improv comedy. Clearly the dorkiest of the three. But the thing is, no matter which one of the three that you choose to do, if you commit to becoming good at making paying audiences laugh, you get to meet a bunch of people from the other two circles. I know a lot of people who do improv and sketch and stand-up. You'll often see stand-up comedians showing up at the improv workshop. A lot of the improvisers I know have done sketch. I've done sketch, both performing and writing. They weren't very good, but your first few attempts at anything rarely are, right? And throughout the years of meeting and geeking out on comedy and conversing and talking shop with all these people, I've picked up a bunch of lenses on how to do it. And of all the lenses I've picked up over the years, there's one that stands out head and shoulders above the others. And to the person who gave me this lens, thank you very much. What I like so much about this lens is that it's not specific to improv. You can broaden it out to comedy in general. But before I present it, I want to lead with some caveats. Just in case it needs to be said, there is no unified theory of comedy that I'm aware of. So obviously not all jokes will fit into this lens. But if you're trying to think of a joke, this lens is a good place to start. There's also another situation where this lens is useful, but we'll get to that part later. Here's the lens. In order to laugh at something, it has to be relatable and surprising. And since I knew I was going to make this video, I took the time to put it on a graph. Now, I didn't label the axes, but the x-axis is relatability and the y-axis is surprise. So generally, whenever you laugh at a joke, it's gonna fall somewhere in this zone here, where you can relate with the premise, but you didn't see it coming a mile away. The jokes in this red zone up here are the jokes that fly over your head, the jokes that you don't get. That's why you don't laugh. The rationale for putting it in the surprise axis here is that you know so little about the topic that you don't have any expectations to subvert. You're not surprised because you don't even know what's supposed to happen. And the jokes that are down here in this red zone are the hack jokes. Like, yes, I get it, but I saw it coming a mile away. It's just not funny. Most dad jokes are in this zone. Now you'll notice that the margin of error is bigger on the bottom than it is on the top. My rationale for that is that the more you can relate with the premise of a joke, the more predictable that it can be and you'll still laugh. That's actually why callbacks are such an effective tool and why they also annoy me. A callback is basically, oh, I remember that from before. Well, you're relating to your past self. How can you not relate with your past self, right? All you need to do is remember the thing that's being called back and not see it coming a mile away. That's why callbacks are so annoying to me, although I laugh at them anyway. Inside jokes are another phenomena like this, where the lower threshold becomes much lower if you are actually there, you know? You had to be there. For someone who wasn't there, the inside joke is somewhere here. It flies over their head. But if you were there, like, oh, boop, boop, ba-doop, even though someone always says boop, boop, ba-doo whenever your friend does that thing, and everyone sees it coming a mile away, but you laugh anyway. Meme formats that end up catching on are self-reinforcing in this way. They become inside jokes as they get used more and more. Before we move on, I just want to talk about preachiness in your comedy. I think that is the trap that most newbies fall into. And something that I didn't say in my original tweet was that not only have I seen my fair share of thinly veiled preaching, I've done it too, so I know how hard it is to build up that patience to really be subtle about the thing that you want to convey. When you preach in your comedy or pander, I'll be using preaching and pandering as synonyms here. There are two main forms that it can take. There's overt preaching, where you are actually stating your beliefs openly and transparently in your scene. You're acting as if it's the character speaking, but it's really you inserting yourself in the scene. The second way is barely more subtle, and it's how you portray the people that you disagree with politically. When you pander, your political opponents will often be caricatures. So when I say that I've done this, for the overt pandering, I've never done this in front of paying audiences, but whenever I was, in a more private setting where I can play faster and looser with my improv, whenever I would play Cubans, I would often complain about how bad things were at home because of socialism. And as far as portraying your political opponents as caricatures, during that same period, whenever I would play cops, my cop characters were hyper violent. I'm really lucky that someone I trusted at the time persuaded me very effectively to take my foot off the gas, and thank you again for that. But yeah, all that is to say, when I say that the patience to be subtle is very difficult to harness, I know this. And that's why I was so unsurprised that Lady Ballers ended up being the hack fest that it ended up being. And there's another popular comedy that gets thrown around for similar messages, which is She-Hulk. Lady Ballers is right-wing She-Hulk, a video essay. So I'll open with what it was like watching Lady Ballers. It was funnier than expected, but by that I mean I was expecting to not laugh at all. I ended up laughing 5 times during the movie. I documented them because they will be important later. The first time I laughed was when Coach Rob and Alex were talking together at the bar. They were basically catching up, and Alex was talking about how hard it is getting roles as an actor for straight white men and all that shit. And Rob made a comment about how he heard they were making Snow White into a neurodivergent lesbian. I laughed at that. Laugh number 2 happened shortly after during the track and field segment. Coach Rob was talking to that admissions lady and ended up getting tased. And when Alex arrived at the scene, the lady who just tased Coach Rob was like, "Oh my God, you're a trans person. I just tased an ally." I laughed at that. Laugh number 3 was after Alex dominated the sporting event and was giving a press conference, and the news anchors in the studio were saying like, "Hey, don't you think that this brave athlete has other advantages?" And the reporter on the field responded with outrage, completely sidestepped the argument and just said, "How dare you?" I laughed at that as well. The other 2 times I laughed were completely apolitical. I'll just name them really quickly. When the coach was getting the team back together and the guy who was living out in the woods was killing a bunch of badgers. When he was asked how many badgers he killed and he said all but one, I fucking lost it. That I'm laughing again just thinking about it. And the other thing was just a running gag. It's a running gag. I've already documented callbacks, so yeah, of course. And I was annoyed when they got me too. For the final beat of that gag, as soon as the character was on screen, I knew exactly what he was gonna say, and I did smile. That's as close to a laugh as something like that is gonna get, which is why I included it here. So yeah, as far as Lady Ballers goes, it's not funny at all, but if you put aside the transphobia, it's just a stupid high school sports movie. And it's explicitly transphobic too, because coming back to the preaching that I covered earlier, at least twice in the movie, a character was giving a monologue, and in that monologue, they all but turned to the camera to say, "And remember, folks, trans people aren't real. And as far as making caricatures of your enemies, I thought they laid it on really thick with the journalism thing. The antagonist, who's a journalist, she was fun enough for me to enjoy her as a character, but the unambiguously evil thing, and she basically just said, I'm evil, I'm a journalist, and we're evil. Jesus Christ. Now let's talk about She-Hulk. It's important to understand how hard I tried to like that show. I was committed to liking that show. I've publicly defended it several times. I still defend Tatiana Maslany to this day. Not only did she do nothing wrong, she did an outstanding job with those garbage-ass scripts she was handed. The reason I tried so hard to like that show is because I had read Immortal Hulk prior, and the Immortal Hulk comics were so good, I fell in love with She-Hulk reading those books. And by extension, every Gamma-based Marvel character has a special place in my heart like that. Obviously, Bruce and Jen are the top two, but even a silly character like Absorbing Man has a special place in my heart because of his role in Immortal Hulk. And yeah, as far as Pandering is concerned, there were a lot of men are trash jokes, both in the context of work and of dating. I don't mind men are trash jokes. They bore me too much to bother me. On the graph here, most men are trash jokes are down here with the dad jokes. And they're even easier to deal with when you can see them coming. Obviously, this is a Disney project in current year. There's gonna be men are trash jokes in it. And I love She-Hulk. I'm absolutely committed to liking the show. But I hit my limit during episode 3. The infamous twerking episode. This might shock some of you, but other things happened during that episode. Megan Thee Stallion was in the entire episode. Celebrity cameos are cringe in and of themselves, but when a celebrity is playing themselves in the cameo, it becomes that much more cringeworthy. And during that episode, there was a segment where She-Hulk was getting some Twitter hate, and that was what pushed me over the edge. I've publicly defended the show several times. The tweets are still up, so I knew that I'm not part of the group of people that are being targeted by this. But I also knew that in the eyes of the people who wrote that segment, I was. And normally I would be able to shrug that off, okay? But let's just say this episode was not the one to put that segment in. When I watched that segment, I said, you know what? Fuck you too. I'm done with y'all. I have tried so hard to like your show, and I'm just taking body blow after body blow after body blow, and that was it. I made the decision to stop watching during that segment, and the infamous twerking scene that you see all the time, this was a post-credits scene, which just confirmed the decision that I had made minutes prior. And just to give you an idea how committed I was to liking She-Hulk, how committed I was to liking that show, I watched the next episode anyway. I said, baby, I'll give you one more chance to win me back. I know you've changed. Please tell me you've changed. And I get discount bin Chris Angel Mind Freak, and I'm like, you know what? It's over. Even Wong can't save this one. So to tie everything back together, Lady Ballers has all the same problems as She-Hulk. There's overt pandering in both of them. In Lady Ballers, people about how trans people aren't real. In She-Hulk, it's the whole, oh, I'm better at dealing with anger than you are because I get catcalled and mansplained all day. And in terms of depicting the enemy as caricatures. In Lady Ballers, there was that journalist character. And in She-Hulk, from what I remember, basically all the men were trash. Both the men she was dating and the men she was working with. Even the Abomination guy, he had some creepy sex cult thing going on. But this leads to a question. What if you enjoyed She-Hulk or Lady Ballers? Does that say anything about you? Let's take a look. Let's come back to this graph from earlier. You'll remember when discussing this lower threshold here, I mentioned how when it comes to inside jokes, your bar will be lowered because you were there. You can relate with your past self inherently to the point where anything that you didn't see coming a mile away will make you laugh, right? Well, there's another circumstance where this bar gets lowered. To the point where the hackiest of jokes will still make you laugh. And it's when the joke is about those people. We all have those people that we like making fun of, those people that we like deriding. And whenever the premise of a joke targets those people, it lets us indulge in an activity that we enjoy so much that we will lower our own standards to laugh anyway. And this is where we come to the second use of this lens. It's useful when you're trying to come up with a joke. But if you want to either explore your own psychology or if you want to explore your own sense of humor and that kind of thing, whenever you catch yourself laughing, to put whatever made you laugh in this graph can serve as a window for you to see whether or not you just like making fun of those people. So yeah, whenever you laugh at a hack joke and it's not an inside joke, it could be because of that. So bringing this back to Lady Ballers, let's look at the examples of the jokes that I laughed at. The political ones. So the Snow White being a neurodivergent lesbian, that's a hack premise. It's been done to death. There was an entire South Park episode that made an uproar. It's the put a chick in it and make her lame and gay. It's that joke, but I don't like Disney. I don't like the pandering, so I chuckled anyway. I lowered my standards. For the admissions chick who felt guilty about tasing Coach Rob, but after seeing Alex, what made me laugh at that is the performativeness. And I know that there are people across the aisle who know this because it's so obvious. There are so many people who are into this progressivism just for the performativeness. And for them, it's an aesthetic that they wear and nothing else. There are so many people like that. So yeah, I don't like the performativeness of those people. I think it's hypocritical and I laughed at it. I lowered my standards. And last but not least, when that reporter responded to the slightest amount of pushback with outrage. Here's the thing, all right? The progressives who somehow thought I was part of you despite my quips about Cuba and socialism. Here's the thing, okay? You can't just put a label on something and call it a day. If you want to say something is transphobic, and we'll focus on that because that's kind of the topic of Lady Ballers. If you want to say something is transphobic and someone asks you why, you need to be able to go at least 1 or 2 layers below the surface of that onion. And you can't just fall back on defining transphobia. So if you say something is transphobic and someone asks you why and you say, oh, it puts trans people at risk or something like that, you're not meaningfully engaging with the question. It is so important to do that. And this is another thing that I know people know this across the aisle because I've had conversations with woke comedians. Throughout the years of just resting on the correctness of your position, there's an intellectual laziness that has developed, which is super exploitable by someone who's able to provide just a little bit of pushback. This clearly doesn't apply to all progressives, but just like the performative thing, the people to whom this doesn't apply know people in their network to whom this does apply, for sure. So yeah, when that reporter just replied with, how dare you, and went on this spiel about how, trans people are brave and shit, yeah, I laughed at that. I lowered my standards. So yeah, if you watch Lady Ballers and you laughed along the entire time, or at least at a good portion of the jokes, there's a higher than random chance that you think trans people are weird or creepy or mentally ill men or whatever. And if you enjoyed She-Hulk and laughed at most of the jokes there's a higher than random chance that you just don't like men. And it's not my place to tell you what you should and shouldn't laugh at, but you are now equipped with the framework with which to explore your own psychology should you choose to do it. And you have an opportunity to do that whenever you laugh at something. So before we go, I just want to tie this into a previous video that I did a while back on a David Chappelle Netflix special. I consider this video to be a spiritual successor to that video. And this isn't the kind of thing to smoothly integrate, which is why I'm kind of tacking it on at the end here. Because again, these are all similar thoughts in my mind, and I had covered this topic before. So after seeing Lady Ballers, I was looking at my notes and just thinking about what I would say in this video, and I wrote this on Dave Chappelle versus Lady Ballers. I think Dave is just talking about shit that he finds interesting, and he's just uninformed. He doesn't realize how hurtful he's being, and unfortunately, the only people who are getting into his bubble of attention are soy jacks who would just be counterproductive and would probably just reinforce his position anyway. Whereas Lady Ballers is gender essentialist propaganda using a high school sports comedy movie as its frame. So yeah, like any newbie comedy writer, if you're gonna get political with your comedy, you're gonna do all that hack shit. Your enemies will be caricatures, you will pander the fuck out of your audience, and it's gonna be a hack-ass movie to most people. So thanks for watching, and here's all I'll ask for. If you know someone that you think would find this video interesting or helpful, please share this with them. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you soon.